Hi everybody! In this video I want to talk a little bit about the features of being part of the European Union, the EU. What I'm not going to spend time on in this video is worrying about the structure of the EU. In truth, there are 7 major institutions that govern the EU. 4 of those are very important. The European Council, the European Commission, the European Court and the European Parliament. They're the 4 most important institutions. But you don't need to worry about what they are, what they do, how they differ from each other. That's not too important. But they all have a certain amount of power over how the EU is governed. What you also don't need to know is a list of all the different members. So there are 28 current members of the EU. You don't need to know them all, but knowing a few little case studies about different countries and their kind of approach to being part of the EU might be quite useful. But you don't need to know a big list of who they are and when they join. That's not important. Okay, so what are the common features of being part of the EU? Well, you should know that the EU is a customs union, so some of these features link to some of the key features of being part of a customs union. Like number 1, the fact that there is free trade between member nations, so tariff and quota free trade between member nations completely. There are common external barriers as well imposed on imports coming in from non-member nations. That's another key feature of a customs union. And for the EU, it tends to be a common external tariff imposed on imports coming in from non-member nations, especially on agriculture-based products. There is a bias in the EU to support the agricultural sector and farmers especially. So agricultural-based products coming into the EU from non-member nations are taxed very, very highly indeed, strong tariffs on those, much higher than on manufactured-based products coming into the EU. Now, the integration within the EU is far deeper than just a basic customs union. There are common policies as well, which all EU member nations must accept and adopt and follow. So common policies on agriculture, fishing, competition, regional policy, environmental policy too. Let's just go through each one and explain what each one is about. So agriculture is a very, very famous example in the EU. The Common Agricultural Policy is one of the best worldwide examples of the minimum price scheme and of a subsidy-based scheme to support local farmers. So the EU want to make sure that the agricultural sector in Europe, it remains strong, that it's there, because people have a kind of loyalty towards it, people respect it. And there are lots of farmers in the EU that rely on that industry for their livelihood, so they want to support such an industry. The Common Agricultural Policy is a policy that aims to do that by setting a price for key staple agricultural items like milk, like cheese, like wine, like wheat. These are all protected by the European Commission, by the European Council, by the European Parliament, by setting this minimum price on them. What it meant is that when it initially occurred, the basic economics of minimum prices took hold. There was a massive excess supply, there was huge butter mountains, milk mountains, grain mountains, as a result of this minimum price being set above the equilibrium price. What it meant is that there had to be huge intervention buying and huge waste in terms of the cost of storage, the cost of destroying some of this excess produce. So more recently what's happened is that European institutions have said to farmers, look, instead of us buying up these excess supplies from you, we'll just pay you to set aside part of your land, not to produce on that land, but we'll pay you to set it aside so that we don't have to deal with these excess costs of storage and of destroying essentially. So what it means is that all EU member nations have to contribute towards the EU budget, and a lot of that budget is spent on maintaining this common agricultural policy. So whether you think it's worthwhile or not, well that's an argument for another day, but common agricultural policy, famous policy. A fisheries policy as well, a quota on how much fish is allowed to be extracted from the sea by each fisherman to maintain a given level of fish in the sea and that there isn't a depletion of fish in the sea, in EU waters. Common competition policy that has to be accepted among all EU member nations. Regional policy as well. So again, EU member countries pay into this European budget, and a lot of it is used to fund social kind of cohesion policies to improve areas of the EU that are deprived. So where there are high levels of poverty, where there is high unemployment, where there is rundown infrastructure. So a lot of this money is spent on supply side improvements, like adult training, like infrastructure, like environmental improvements, like promoting tourism, so like improving poverty levels and increasing employment in these areas. So these kind of important social kind of areas spent on in this regional policy to make sure that the EU meets a certain standard of living. There is also common environmental policies as well. The EU has set policies on emission standards, set policies on allowed levels of pollution, set policies on tradable permits as well. So there's an emissions trading scheme in the EU that all EU member nations must kind of buy into. Much deeper integration in terms of free movement of labour and capital. If I wanted to, as an EU citizen, it's my right to go and work wherever I want to work. If I want to go and retire in 50 years' time in Spain, I can do so. That's my right as an EU citizen. Same for setting a business. EU businesses can go and work and set up anywhere they want to, completely free of charge in that respect. So free movement of labour and capital, free movement of business. There is some coordination of economic policies set by the European Council, by the European Parliament, especially of tax policy. And also there is some deeper integration in terms of 17 EU member nations also deciding to adopt the same currency, the euro, and therefore being part of the Eurozone. Alright, so knowing what the key features of the EU are, very useful, might be relevant for you in an essay that comes up in your exam. That's it guys, thanks for watching, see you all next time.